I am going to talk about how Drizly is using dbt and Snowflake together to share data. So just an overview of what I'm going to cover. First, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Drizly and our data infrastructure, why data sharing is super important for us. Then I'm going to go into exactly like what Snowflake data sharing is, how we're using dbt to help this whole process, and then I'm just going to briefly touch on how we use Terraform to automate some of the infrastructure around the data sharing accounts. So first, if you haven't heard of Drizly, we are based in Boston and we are alcohol e-commerce. We partner with local liquor stores. So you can get beer, wine, and liquor delivered to you. And usually in under 60 minutes, but in this COVID era, usually a little bit longer than that. Right now, we have somewhat a small data team, a director, one data engineer, Dennis, who is actually on the call, one data scientist, and 5 analysts. So this is kind of an overview of just what our infrastructure looks like. I started almost a year ago at Drizly in May 2019, and this is what our infrastructure looked like when I joined. So we were on Redshift. We weren't using dbt. We didn't really have like a centralized Git repo or anything like that. We used Domo for kind of like everything, which is a data viz tool if you haven't heard of it. But yeah, it just like wasn't ideal. So as of, I think November 2019 is when we kind of started with our new infrastructure. So we are using Fivetran now for a lot of external data sources. We're using dbt. We have a great Git repo, and then we're using Snowflake for all of our data and sharing. And then from there, going into our Domo tool to visualize any data that we process into Snowflake. So I just want to explain a little bit why data sharing is really important to us and why it's kind of unique in our industry. So part of the like alcohol industry has to do with the 3-tier system, which is kind of how alcohol is regulated in the US. So first there are like alcohol suppliers, so like ABI, they make Bud Light, Budweiser, etc. Then there are distributors, and then there are like liquor stores and bars. So suppliers cannot sell directly to customers, and they can't sell directly to liquor stores. So that's where they go through distributors. And we are kind of like uniquely positioned between liquor stores and suppliers to that we can work with both parties. So we can actually like have contracts with liquor suppliers or alcohol suppliers, and they can kind of use us to drive customers to their products. So we're kind of one of the only places they can get that insight into how their customers are shopping, especially online. We do a lot with them to sponsor products, co-branded marketing efforts, and work with them on inventory. So with us, they have a lot of insight into where their products are available or not available, and we can share that data with them so they can drive customers to the places where they know their products are located. So now I'll jump into what exactly Snowflake data sharing is. So this is kind of unique to Snowflake, where you can work with external parties even if they don't have a Snowflake account themselves. These are called reader accounts. So this is what we use, and you can spin up these accounts, and there's not any like extra additional cost to these accounts. And this kind of structure is how it looks. So you have your normal prod Snowflake account. That would be like our Drizly internal account. You can share views through kind of this other object that they call a share. And then each different account has its own like database and warehouse, users, roles, all of the normal infrastructure that is part of a Snowflake account. And just to reiterate why we're sharing data, we partner with a lot of alcohol brands and suppliers who are interested in using a lot of the data we capture, especially for marketing and inventory. So before we moved to Snowflake, we were sharing data, but in a less ideal fashion. So we were doing a lot of SFTP jobs, which were pretty frustrating and not very scalable, which was another reason that Snowflake was such an amazing option for us. So this diagram here kind of shows how we used to share data. So we had a bunch of different data sources that all went into Redshift. And then we had a bunch of ad hoc data scripts that would push data to different locations depending on where the supplier wanted it. So sometimes it was S3, sometimes it was an SFTP job. But it was definitely not a great experience working with the data this way. So yeah, some of the pitfalls were it wasn't very scalable. Each partner had different requirements. They all had different systems. Each script was unique. It would be a long back and forth process, lots of emails, lots of troubleshooting. We've definitely had cases where like the partner sends us the incorrect IP address and everyone's like banging their head against the wall. Why isn't this working? Just to find out that it was like a typo in the IP address. And with Snowflake and DBT, we can actually scale these accounts so that if we added one new account or 10, it's pretty much the same effort, which is amazing for us. So just to reiterate our current infrastructure, this is where sharing kind of sits. So it comes out of our prod database into a share, which then the external consumers can read from. So DBT's role in all of this really allows us to automate the modeling of a lot of our shared data sets and automate a lot of the Snowflake commands that allow sharing to take place. So we use a lot of DBT's tools like seeds, macros, post hooks, pre-hooks, and a lot of the like out of the box DBT configuration abilities. So some of the things that we had to set up to get this going, we have a specific schema that holds all of our sharing data sets and models. We have a specific seed file that has our reader accounts and like associated internal IDs, which I'll go into in the next couple slides. And then a couple custom macros that we created to go through kind of the Snowflake specific commands that have to be run for each share, which I'll go through. So first is the DBT seed. So this is just a CSV that has the company IDs, which we use like internally. Say like company ID 4 is like ABI or something. And then the account ID is what Snowflake creates for that specific reader account. So this is actually becomes like a really powerful tool to automate and scale models. So that I'll go through in the next slide here. So using the current account function in Snowflake is pretty amazing in combination with that seed, because instead of having to make like 10 different models filtered to the specific company, we can create just one model, and depending on which account is logged in, their view will be filtered to their specific ID. So we only need to set this up one time and it will work across any number of accounts that we set up. Yeah, this is how do I go back? This is like has been life-changing for us to be able to set stuff up this way. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was for supplier sharing or for Snowflake sharing, views have to be secure. So we have set like the secure equals true in the config here. And we have this post hook, which will actually share the view, which I'll go through in the next slide. I'm trying to see the chats here. All right, and then this is how we set up the part of our DBT project under our sharing schema. So we have a couple pre and post hooks, which I'll go through the macros next. But we have a pre-hook, which actually creates the share, and we have two separate shares going on right now just because they have a little bit separate requirements. So we have a Drizly share and a Molly share, which is a retailer that we work with, and the post hooks, which do all of the grants that we need. So it will grant to our like reporter role, which is our kind of like role for the general public of Drizly, BI tool, and share, which is the actual share account. Okay, so this is the first macro that I went through that creates the actual share. Another thing to mention is that we set these up so they only will run against prod. So if we're testing on like stage, these macros won't run, which is really nice that we can set it up that way. I'm sure there's ways we can like simplify these macros, but this is kind of where we are now. So the create share just runs some specific commands on our prod side that allows us to create the shares and add the specific accounts to each share that we create on each prod run. And then this is to actually share the view that we create in the model. So this was the post hook on the model that I showed earlier. So this will actually grant like usage onto the schema in the table or the view that we create in the model. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on Terraform. So when you create a reader account, it's pretty much its own Snowflake account. So it needs all of the typical database objects in Terraform allows us to kind of streamline all of that and have all of this in one place. So it's very easy to make changes and see where things are affected. So for each Snowflake account, we need to create a database, a warehouse, roles, users, and resource monitors, which resource monitors aren't working currently on Terraform, but I have a link to the issue that I'll send out if anyone's interested, if you want to follow along with that. But yeah, that's kind of the overview of how we're using DBT and Snowflake for sharing data. If anyone has questions or wants me to go through anything again, let me know.
That's incredible. Like I have done SFTP uploads and been in that 30 email loop where like something wasn't working and you never know whose end it's on. And I've emailed things as CSVs so way too many times to external stakeholders way too many times in my life. I have zero questions because I'm just like blown away by like how, I mean, obviously like it's not easy, like there's like quite a few moving pieces, but it makes so much sense. I set up a share the other day manually from our like main Fishtown account to a DBT Learn account that we use with anonymized data, and like got everything wrong about it. Like didn't create it as a secure view, didn't get the like permissions right. I was just bashing my head for so long. And I was just like, I should just done this in DBT and like done it once, version controlled it. Because now whenever we need to like do a new share, I'm like, I have no idea what commands I ran to get it right. So yeah, I have no questions other than just like, I just wanted to say this is amazing, and you should be very proud of how like the different tools that you've leveraged to solve this problem. I think it's really cool.
Awesome, thank you. I can definitely send this presentation around too if it's helpful for anybody. I don't know how, maybe Claire, you can help me with that to get everyone's emails that's interested.
Yeah, we typically upload it afterwards onto YouTube. I'll confirm with you afterwards if that's cool.
Okay, yeah.
And we can link it there. We're actually going to be better about writing these things on Discourse as well. So we'll link everything there with a quick summary. But yeah, does anyone else have any questions on this?
I have a quick question. Firstly though, this is super cool, and thanks for doing the presentation. I think it's going to be really relevant to me personally. So the question I had was in terms of provisioning accounts to start with, and the sort of interplay between Terraform and these DBT scripts, is the workflow sort of that you'll create your new list of shares in Terraform, provision the accounts, and then the DBT job can run and automatically sort of assign access to those shares, but there's sort of like a two-step process there?
Yeah, let me go back. So yeah, so our data engineer actually, if we create a new account, he would do that on like our side. So I think you kind of have to do that through the UI to create a new account. If I'm wrong on that, Dennis can correct me, but once we have the specific like account ID like that's listed in here, like the LLA20477, we can plug that in here, and then separately we would create like the database and warehouse and stuff in Terraform, which is kind of at this point just copy and pasting a current setup and then switching out like the account IDs. And then when we're ready to run it in DBT, we would just add the account ID to this macro line and it would create the share on the prod runs so that when it gets to the model, it would share the specific view with the share and then would show up in that account's database, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Actually, I do have one question I was thinking about. Do you have any external stakeholders who are using Snowflake and would prefer for you to actually use like share with their existing account? If yes, like does it work the same way? If not, and that's a thing that you might do in the future, do you anticipate it becoming problematic, or do you think you just like it'll still work nicely?
We don't have anyone else on Snowflake that we work with, but I can't imagine the process being that different. I'm not as familiar with like sharing directly to someone's Snowflake account versus like a reader account that we manage, but I can't imagine it
Much the
being
same, yeah.
too different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah, because I've done it to like non-reader accounts, and I think it's the same. So I'm pretty sure this would work. But I was just interested to know if you'd done that part yet.
Yeah, not yet, but maybe one day we'll have a supplier on Snowflake.
Their minds are already probably like blown that like they're not getting this via CSVs.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's crazy how different each supplier is, like technically, like some still run on like Excel everything and then some are more advanced with like their data setup, but we definitely have a wide range of technical ability across stakeholders that we work with.
And when like in terms of the users on the like in the reader accounts, do you just create one user that then like gets used by everyone at that account, or are you also like provisioning individual like user accounts? Then that feels like it would be end up being quite a lot.
Yeah, so right now we just create one user for the account and then they would just log in with the one user and password for whoever's using it.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. I
Have, oh,
sorry, I one thing I forgot to mention was that uh the activity on the reader accounts does get billed back to your account. So that's the thing with like setting up resource monitors just to make sure they're not going crazy and increasing your usage too much, but we haven't run into any issues with that.
That would also be so interesting to like be able to track how much each of your suppliers is actually using this data. Um, it's kind of fun. Like I always feel like internally when someone, you know, if I'm working for a company internally and like someone's like, I really need this data, and then you give it to them, and then like the ability to actually measure where they're actually running queries now that they have the data is pretty fascinating. So I think that'd be
Yeah.
pretty cool to like have that bird's eye view of like, okay, we built this for 10 suppliers. Like have they logged in? Are they running queries? Are they running too many queries and driving costs up? Yeah, that's like an extra level of metadata that is just not possible, like on Redshift in particular, or just like with most tech stacks. That's really cool.
Yeah. We haven't set up anything to look at that yet, but I can see like in the future if we have a lot more suppliers using this that we would want to set something up like that to see who's using it and how much they're using it. It would be really cool to look at.
Yeah. You should check out the GitLab Snowflake spend package. They've like done some DBT modeling just to like be able to build charts really quickly to say like this warehouse is being used, like, you know, accounting for this much of the costs. We use that internally as well, so it's pretty good.
Cool.
I was going to say before, I think a really cool idea to pair with this concept of data shares would be automating sort of the subset of DBT docs that are relevant to the tables in that or views in that schema, and generating like a subset of the docs site. So that's sort of what I like. My dream state is being able to share the DBT docs I've already written with a customer through our website somehow, and provision a share for them. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I haven't had a chance to actually look at it yet, but I reckon that would be a really awesome setup. So hopefully I get a bit of time to look at it this next
Yeah,
quarter.
I think at the moment, like you can hide models, but they still sort of show up in the DAG just because like it's like the DAG is so much about lineage. So they just grayed out. But that's a really interesting use case for like, how can you, yeah. I don't know. I think if I were doing that, I'd almost be tempted to build two different projects. Like one that's all the internal stuff that you don't want to show, and the second one, which is like the external stuff, and using the things from your first project as sources in the second, which is like a bad practice, but I think that's the only way you can like break the links apart to like show them as separate like separate DAGs, and then you could like just render the second one. It depends how sensitive the like upstream transformations are, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's messy to expose to a customer for sure. So
Yeah.
that's probably the best
The
way to
other
go.
option is to slurp up in post, like slurp up the manifest.json file.
That's kind of what I was thinking,
Yeah, it's probably
but
like that.
I don't really want to do it. But yeah, maybe.
Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I guess I can hand it back to Claire.